Hey, Ms. Bahak here, and I'm really excited to share this video with you because I've been wanting to make it for a very long time. I've been helping people launch podcasts. I've done dozens of these for companies and creators of all sizes since 2016. And people hire me for consultations where, I help them set up their microphone and equipment and help them actually launch the show. And in my experience, be cheaper if I just record a video for you here at once and, document as much as possible so that you can get going on a lot of those steps without my assistance or anybody else's assistance and get this thing out the door. Because I've seen that the clients that are most successful when they're starting from scratch are the ones who can get launched as fast as possible, because now you have a living, breathing thing out there and it forces you to tighten up your workflow and your post-production system versus just staying in the planning stages forever. I know people who have been in there for years. So I want to help you by breaking this down in an organized way and trying to treat it just like we would be maybe on a phone call or consultation, and me helping you out. So one of the things that I'm going to use as kind of a guiding light here is going to be a podcast launch checklist. This is something that I made a few years ago, back in 2020. I've edited and evolved it, since, but it's basically a checklist. You can download it for free if you want. It's on podmahal.com, but basically it'll help you launch an audio only and a video podcast if you want to. If you're doing an audio only show, you're going to eliminate some of these steps that have video here, but it takes you all the way from scratch, like inception, coming up with a show idea, what you're going to talk about, who's it for, all the way to how do you promote this thing after, once your podcast is out, So I'm going to try to fill in some of those gaps in, what you might be wondering about before you start a show, so that you can be really informed if starting a podcast is something you want to do in the first place. And if you do it, what can you actually expect in the first few months, the first year, first 100 or 200 episodes? The very first thing you're going to want to decide is the format for your show. This dictates a lot of things: the equipment that you're going to be using, the software you're going to be using, the complexity of post-production, the people that you might need to help support you, or the skills that you might need to learn or acquire. So I always recommend starting with a audio only podcast. You can always add video later, but doing audio only preserves nature of the medium, right? It allows you to show up in sweatpants and record and get content out in a casual way, versus I've just found the second you add video to it, it does change the dynamic of the show, right? You are aware that you're being observed. You got to think about where you're going to film, what's in your surroundings. People feel more self-conscious sometimes. So if you know that that is you and that adding video is going to put up a barrier, and just one more barrier to actually recording, then you might want to hold off on that. I will be sharing how you can add the video element to your podcast later on, but I'm going to start with audio only since it's the most simple. So we've decided, let's say we're going to go audio only just in the beginning so we can get some reps and episodes out there. The next thing you're going to want to consider about the format of your podcast is, will you be having guests on? Will there be a steady co-host? Will you be doing solo episodes? Or maybe it's a combination of all of it. I'll give you my recommendation. I think doing solo episodes and having a mixture of guest ones are a very strong way to go. You have more control of your production process. You're not relying on just other guests to give you content. You are using it similar to how maybe somebody like Dr. Andrew Huberman or Cal Newport, both are, professors and scientists and, engineers, people like that, who are kind of delivering a lecture in a way through this format of a video podcast. It's solo, they're talking straight to the camera. The audio is recorded, as well, but it was a while before they both started adding guests to their show, and they will both develop its own audiences, right? So Theo Von is another example. He has a podcast called This Past Weekend. The solo episodes that he has get less views than obviously the big comedians and guests that he might bring on, but it has its own fan base where he talks a little differently. He's more himself when other people aren't around, and as a fan, as a listener, it really is a therapeutic thing to listen to. You feel like you're just talking to him in a room while he's reflecting on stuff. It grows slower, but solo episodes are something where you have a much stronger and more dedicated following over time. Obviously, the guests help you grow a lot quicker because, if you're having really interesting, guests with a following on already, there's a little bit of that draw that's coming to your show. But I want you to consider this. You don't just want other people's audiences that are coming just for that guest. You want people who are coming to listen to your podcast for you. And the way to develop that is have a mixture of solo episodes where you get to really put out your point of view and give value, and then have guest episodes where you can use it to build trust, expertise, authority in your domain. But at the same time, it's really focused on, when you have guest episodes, you're focused on the other person, right? You're not trying to take all the limelight for yourself. So I always recommend having a balance of both. It gives you less pressure to start with just guests only, and then anytime you do solo episodes, it's like, oh, they don't have any guests this week and they're running out of content ideas or something, right? It keeps it a very like, hey, no, we're solo primarily, but we're gonna do guests to help add variety and bring more value for you guys. So that's just my take on maybe the structure of your show there. The next question with formatting is going to be, will you be recording this in person or will you be recording this show remotely? Now, if you are doing a video podcast and it is more, you have a co-host or something. I work with plenty of shows where they actually rent out a studio or they've built a space in their house where it's made for that. And they have 4-person podcasts that are done there. That production process is way more complicated than, doing 4 people remotely on Riverside. So I always recommend start with remote if you can, just because you have more control of your frame versus when you step out into in-person. If you don't have somebody helping you set up all the equipment, is very anxiety provoking the first few times because you are now setting up everything while you're maintaining convo with the guest, and then you're also going to take them through the whole episode, and it's just a lot of hats to wear, especially for some of my clients that I'm thinking of that are a little bit technologically averse. It's just way easier to do remote. It's a little bit more scalable. You can do it more frequently. I will say, if you have an opportunity to do in person, whether it's every once in a while or you decide to do a lot of them that way, there is a higher production quality feel to those shows, I think, than there is to remote. So that's an advantage that you have there. The dynamic with your guests is also a little different. You can interrupt them and it doesn't feel like, oh no, you talk first. It just feels like a normal conversation. What if you are recording your podcast in person? How does that change the equipment that you're going to need? It does add some complexity, but the 2 main pieces that you'll need is going to be lighting, but we already established that artificial lighting you should have even if you're doing a solo thing remotely, so that should already be there. But you're gonna have to think about wherever you're recording this in person, you're gonna need to bring a lighting setup, something that's maybe portable or whatever. Number 2 is going to be a high quality camera. So you're not gonna use your webcam that you were using before. You're likely going to use your iPhone or whatever your mobile device is. That typically, if you have the storage available, has the highest quality that you can record without having to make another purchase. Because if you get into buying a new DSLR camera, like I have one, I'm recording on a Sony a7R III. I have a separate Sigma 15mm lens that I put on it, and you have to learn how to use the settings. There's a big learning curve that some of my clients have went this route and got it, and it took so many episodes where we messed up the video because there's nobody there to help and actually helping record it. It's like they're remembering what you told them, and when it comes down to it, you feel too frazzled, and it's just more complicated to offload and do all that versus record it onto your phone, share it through AirDrop or upload it to Google Drive or Dropbox, and you should be pretty good to go. You could also record in 4K with an iPhone if you wanted. It's also the type of thing where if you've got multiple iPhones or an older one laying around, you could have multiple camera angles that way as well. It's a little bit more efficient to do that. Battery life is also something you have to think about with digital cameras. So after 30 minutes, 27 minutes, most of them shut down because of, preserving just kind of energy, and it's just to prevent overheating and things like that. There are some firmwares and things that you can do to break past that limit and record longer. But again, that's something you have to think about and do with a DSLR camera. And some people that I know are willing to do that, but a majority of them are like, no, this is just going to be one more barrier that allows you to not do the video podcast. You're going to give up on it. So use the phone. It's headache free. It saves you money, clear up some of your storage, and that is probably the best option for video. The third thing that you are going to need for an in-person recording setup is going to be an audio interface. So you You've probably seen a lot of podcasts that got that big square box, the Focusrite thing with like a dozen knobs on it, right? And it looks super complicated, like you're at a radio station. That's cool. That works too. It's great. It's high quality. I personally am a fan of the Zoom H6. So the Zoom H6, it's actually sitting on the other side there, but the Zoom H6 is something that, you know, I've been using for over 7 years now, and it's literally fits in the palm of my hand. Let me see. So look, this is the Zoom H6. It fits in the palm of my hand, right? It can fit in a backpack, and it's got 4 inputs. So an XLR cable is going to get plugged into here, and then one for your guest or co-host, and then you can have up to 2 more if you really want it. You've got the gain control, right, for the microphone on each of these, and it's fairly straightforward for you to like turn on, hit record. You get to monitor your audio levels and see, you know, how they look and if it's balanced from the start. And then typically, you know, this has an SD card, right, that you would pull out and you can upload it onto your computer, or you can do it through USB. There's right here that you would upload onto your computer. Now, they have new versions of this, right? Like this was bought 7 years ago. They're updating their models and stuff, but essentially you want something that can record at least 2 inputs. I like to have 4 just because in case you ever have a third person on the show, if you're getting this thing, it's just nice to be able to have that option. So this is typically like when I bought this, it was about $350, right? But again, I've had it for over 7 years now and it works like brand new. I still use it to this day. And I don't even use it for just when I'm traveling and stuff like that. I might use it when I don't feel like recording into the computer and you just want to record directly into something headache-free, stop, start, new recordings real quick and easy. This is a brilliant option for that. So if you're like me, you like to have something that kind of fits in the pocket, fits in your backpack, but still performs really, really, really well, then this is going to be your choice. If you want to go with the mixers and things like that, that it looks a little bit more complicated or professional, whatever you want to call it, that works too. And I will link that in the description below. But those are the 3 main differences in terms of your recording setup when you're doing an in-person show. Of course, you're going to have multiple microphones, right? So that is a given. So choosing kind of a stand, or you having a boom arm, where are you kind of latching this stuff onto? That's kind of important. Handheld mics are really good. I've done a review on that. The Shure SM48. It's like $40-50 for that handheld microphone. But you can plug it right into here. Everybody's kind of holding onto their own mic, no need for a stand. Feels kind of a little bit more, it can feel conversational. Some people that I've talked to, client consults, they've said like it makes them feel like they're singing in church and things like that. So they're like, oh, I don't like it. It gives me a karaoke vibe. Okay, cool. I know comedians who love holding onto that microphone because it gives them the feel of like being on stage and talking on a mic. You know what I mean? So it just depends what your style and preference is. But the mic is already a given. You're going to need multiple of those that has an XLR input, right? So the end of it can go into this instead of just a USB input, which goes into your computer. So that's the main difference. Lighting, a nice camera, something to record with if you're doing video, and then an audio interface that captures all of your audio so that in post-production, you or your editor can sync it up and capture the best of the best. There are other tiny complexities based on your studio and things that you might have, but really with most people, it comes down to these 3.